Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. My name is Jim Lynch. My privilege to serve as the Executive Director of AWSA, just finishing my 28th year with AWSA. Time does indeed fly. And my complete pleasure and privilege to introduce Kim Marshall, who was nice enough to join us today. Kim has been in education over 50 years, teaching, serving as a principal, serving in district leader roles. Back in 2003, Kim started publishing the Marshall Memo, which we are very, very proud to be able to share with members as part of a statewide subscription, which Kim is incredibly wonderful at working with us on that, and we appreciate that. And, you know, for the 28 years I've been here, I've always heard our members lament the fact that they always felt behind on keeping up with the latest on research on leading and learning. And nobody has done more to serve principals feeling more up to date and on top of things than Kim Marshall. So we are so pleased to have him here today on 10 ways to avoid PLC Lite. And again, we're so proud that Kim is joining us from the East Coast. So please turn your cameras on. We're going to engage on this really important topic with a tremendous thought leader in our field today. So Kim, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Great to be here. Greetings from Brookline, Massachusetts, where it is a lovely sunny day. So I got obsessed with PLCs when I was a principal, and the 15 years I was a principal, we kind of began to stumble into this, the idea of teacher teams working together, looking at student work and so forth. We got inspired by Grant Wiggins at one point and had a monthly, actually every 9-week writing assessment, and I'll show some graphics from that. And then I got exhausted as a principal. 2002, I started coaching principals, and I had the amazing privilege of working in Newark, New Jersey with Paul Bambrick-Santoyo, who was in the very beginning of his career as a principal and was just beginning to implement PLCs. They weren't called that in his school in Newark. And then I followed him. I learned a lot more from him than he learned from me as a coach, and watched it and watched his book getting published. And so I followed this very closely in the Marshall Memo. And in the recent Best of Marshall Memo website that some of you have looked at, you notice that the section on PLCs is not called PLCs, because we knew how toxic the word had become in some places. So we called it results-focused teams. So that's sort of my theme today. So let me share my slides here. Actually, before I do that, let me share my screen. And I got some slides here. I got some videos. I want to make this as interactive as possible. I'll pull away from this and do some conversation. I'd like to hear from you. But this term PLC Lite came from Doug Reeves and Rick DeFore a few years ago in an article they wrote. And so that's sort of, how can we make this really good? And I'm sure some of you out there have figured this out. So I hope you're going to chime in. So here's a photo that might be a good PLC. Of course, we'd have to listen in to see what's going on, but there's some good signs here, right? We got a laptop, we got some work, we got some coffee, we got some candy, we got people kind of leaning forward. And so we get a little closer than that. I'd like to use polling today. So if you could please grab a cell phone, and if you can go to texting, and you're going to send a text to 37607. Tracy, it looks so 37607, send it to, so type that in the to box of your cell phone, sending a text, and then you're going to write in the message box, Kim Marshall 346 with no spaces, and don't worry about capitals. So do those two things and hit send, and you'll be part of the polling, and we can hear from you anonymously throughout the presentation this afternoon. So 37607 in the to box and Kim Marshall 346. So are people beginning to get back a message that says they're part of the group? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay, and let me give a little more time because I was on a presentation recently where they rushed me and I was very frustrated. So 37607 in the to, and actually, Jim, if you want to put this in the chat, just so if they're late arrivals, people can have this at their fingertips. Okay, so here's our first question. You got to check in. What's the state of your mind? Okay, so 2 words. Type in 1 word and hit send. type in another word and hit send. This could be your personal state of mind, your professional state of mind. Just kind of get a quick check-in on where you are as this school year wraps up. No kidding. Jumbled. Freedom. Anxious. Motivated, eager. Let's take another half minute, kind of get your thoughts out here. And by the way, I should have said, I'm going to save these slides and I will send them to Jim and he can send them to you. So you'll have everything, including these responses when we're done. Okay, overwhelming, tired, excited, curious, anxious are the biggest ones here. Stressed, motivated. We've got quite a good mixture here. Take another 10 seconds. Okay, maybe get in a couple more words. Now, this is a pretty good summary of American educators these days. So now let's get your sense about how PLCs are going in your district. So just check out these and just send one letter, hit the letter and hit send on the sort of the general status. We'll get into more detail as we go along. And if you're just joining us, look in the chat for the code for getting your cell phone texting feature to work so you can respond to these poll questions, because we're going to have these throughout today. Got quite a bell-shaped curve going here. Good to see not too much wasted time here, but that the C response here of just the PLC is this what my mother used to call the slop gobble, sort of the, whatever we want to do as a group, we're going to call it a PLC. But we got some people who are really got it cooking there at the top of there. Okay, so interesting, quite a mixture. It looks like a lot of people are going to be interested in what this. So I always like to ask with any bright idea in education, what's the problem to which it is the solution? And here's a look at what the problem has been over the years in many schools. In fact, visitors from Japan and other countries are often struck by how isolated American educators are from each other. Tendency to be sort of a school is a collection of classrooms loosely connected by corridors and stairways. And of course, what we want to do is to work smart. Not saying that educators are mice, but let's just say if we were to put our heads together and look at this very difficult ongoing challenge of teaching all kids, it'd be good to work together. So here's a moment of truth in classrooms. So a teacher has taught a unit, maybe a unit on poetry or quadratic equations or fractions, and does an assessment at the end of 5 weeks of instruction, and the achievement looks like this. I mean, these kids aced it, these kids did solid work, these kids barely scraped by, and these kids actually failed. So what often happens next? Unfortunately, what often happens next is the teacher moves on. They've covered the curriculum, to be with the pacing guide, not to have the principal breathing down her neck, etc. But we know that this is not the best scenario. And the question is, how can we back up from this and get a better profile? Never going to have a perfect profile, but a better profile of student achievement. How can we intervene earlier? And I do believe PLC is done right, or one of those ways of doing it. So of course, student learning is measured by assessments, and we got summative assessments, big deal state tests. We got, SATs, ACTs, IB tests, final exams, et cetera. Those are the final one. Okay, we're done. But then there's interim assessments or unit assessments, and then there's on the spot or in the classroom assessments as teaching goes on. And the word formative is used somewhat confusingly for both of these. But today's focus is mostly about the interim or unit assessments. Okay, the on the spot is super important. The research on that is absolutely rock solid. But this is where PLCs come in. It's with this kind of assessment here. And so the big idea of interim assessment is, let's not wait for the final exam. Let's give iterations of it during certain points during the year, December, maybe March, and so forth. And let's use the information from that to improve teaching, so the summative assessment is better. And these are sometimes called benchmark, common formative, all that. And Richter 4 is really the granddaddy of Richter 4 from Adlai Stevenson High School in Illinois, originally outside of Chicago. And he asked these questions, which everyone is very familiar with these days. What do we want students to learn? So clarity on learn. And the we is important. What do we as a teacher team want? How will we know when students have learned it? So that's good assessments, interim assessments. And then how will we respond? And that's the real work of the PLC. And then what if they already know it? What are we doing about enrichment there? So those are sort of the classic questions. And people, I must say, the first time I sort of looked at interim assessments and at Paul Bambrick Santoyo's school in Newark, New Jersey, I said, hey, he makes it look easy, but it isn't easy. And in fact, Paul says interim assessments and PLCs is something that has not traveled well. It is not translated well from one situation to another. So a few educators are doing a fabulous job, including some of you on the call, and others it's going wrong in a variety of ways, which we'll sort of get into. And Rick DeFore wrote an article with Doug Reeves a few years ago. Before he passed away, we lost an amazing educator a couple of years ago, with the concern about PLC Lite, where people are having conversations, but they're not using the student information to continually improve teaching and to really meet the needs of the kids who are not getting it for some reason. And if it's light, if it isn't working well, then there is this permanent underclass of failure. The kids sit through remediation, but they don't really get better. And you continue to have the haves and the have-nots in schools. So here's a list of some of the things that have gone wrong. And with your cell phone, and again, if you're late arriving, or if you just arrived, sorry, no one's late in this, look in the chat for the code here. So you're going to send a letter for any things in your school that you think are not going well, or reasons why PLCs aren't going well. So teachers can be afraid that it's a gotcha. They're going to be, fired or evaluated if their kids don't do well. The tests themselves are not very good. They're not given frequently enough, maybe 2 times a year, or they're giving too frequently. We're pulling up the plant every day to see if the kids are learning and killing the damn thing. The kids blow it off, especially a problem in high schools. There's slow turnaround time. We'll get to that in a minute. Confusing data display. Teachers don't discuss it. There isn't the PLC time, or they have the PLC time, but it does culture nice. So they don't really get into the hard conversations about what's working and what isn't working. And there's no follow-up with the kids. So I'll shut up and let you continue to respond here. You can respond to as many of these as you want. Just text the letter for each response that describes a problem with PLCs in your school. And again, you can do as many as you like here. So this is very interesting. So frequency is not a problem and data display is not a problem. That's refreshing. The biggest issue here, 13 of you, teachers don't discuss. So that means that maybe the teachers are convened, and then the culture of nice is the next biggest one, the people not really stepping up and perhaps pushing each other. Come on, we can do better than this. Very pervasive, and that's what makes facilitation and leadership in PLC so incredibly important. We still have some responses coming in here. Low quality tests is an issue. Not following up with the kids, that would help. we get the information, but then we got to actually follow up. Again, I'm going to save these graphs so that you'll be able to see them, when we get finished. Let's move on here. So actually, let's not do this. Let's keep going here. So my analysis, and I believe you received a one-pager on this. These are the 11 areas that I think are necessary for PLC's results-focused teacher teams to work effectively. And we're going to roll through these one at a time. If you have the one-pager, if you have a hard copy or if you have it online, you may want to score yourself on each one of these. So it is like a 4, 3, 2, 1 scale. So you can like a self-assess. So at the end of this, when we get finished, you'll be able to see what are the areas that need the most work in your school or your district. So let's start off with, and by the way, the theory of action here is that if you're doing these well, you're going to get higher student achievement, your achievement gap is going to get better, the morale is going to get better, and life will be good. So that's it. So go ahead. So the first one, of course, is getting teachers to trust this process so that it actually will work. And teachers are not, they're not stupid to get worried a little bit when the results of the tests that they're giving their kids are shared among administrators and shared with other teachers. It is natural for people to be a little defensive, even if they're doing very well. Especially, again, if it's electronic, and especially if the central office is seeing it, okay? So in addition to this, there's a lot of resistance to testing. So I live in Massachusetts, which is the anti-testing capital of the galaxy. We got Alfie Cohn here, we had Ted Sizer, we had Debbie Meyer, we got Fair Test, we got all these organizations that are pushing to have less testing, especially high stakes testing. And there's a whole strain in American education of just let me teach, come on, why are we giving these tests? Why are we wasting all this time on this? But then within a PLC, there's the fear of looking, not so good compared to your colleagues. And so that's, very, very much of a concern. So there's a wonderful article that I summarized in Marshall Memo 78, way back at the beginning of the Marshall Memo. It was an article, I'll just summarize it briefly here. So Camden County, Georgia, poor district with low achievement. And they decided, okay, we're going to do interim assessments. We're going to have teacher teams look at the results. And so they gave an interim assessment and the teacher sat down and there was a facilitator in the room sort of facilitating these meetings. And phase one for 2 months was complete rebellion by the teachers. I'm not a statistician. I was hired to teach. What are we doing this for? It's too much. And they also said the results, the tests were kind of confusing, so forth. So the facilitators kept trying and they improved the tests a little. So in phase two, the teachers were being defensive. So, I didn't teach it that way. So the question is unfair. It's making me look bad. So they fixed it a little bit. And then phase three, then people started accusing the tests of being tricky. So trick questions, so they're not really measuring my students' learning. And then they fixed some more things. And then in phase four, and this is months and months going by here, then teachers began to think about, well, if I taught it a little bit differently, maybe it would be better. And finally in phase five, they were really cooking. And one of the teachers said, before this, it was like shooting at a basket in the dark. There's no way we could see it. Now we can see what's going on. And this district, Camden County, Georgia, they went from being one of the lowest performing in the state to number 10 in the whole state of Georgia for over a period of years. It took a lot of hard work. So I think this can be done more quickly. But here's a question for you. Looking at those 5 phases with your cell phone again, which phase are you kind of at right now? And I just sort of rolled through in this district, but does any of these stages to describe the attitude of your teacher teams to this kind of work now? So just text the letter that characterizes more what you are going through, what your teachers are feeling subjectively at this point. Oh, we have quite a variety here. And if you've arrived late, look in the chat for the code for getting your cell phone texting to work so you can respond to these questions. Wow, we're all over the map here, from rebellion and confusion and overload all the way to cooking with gas. C is the only one that's not here. So this is fairly common, and this shows how difficult it is to do interim assessments, PLC work well. So change moves at the speed of trust. Absolutely, you've got to establish trust. So how can you get teachers to really sort of be less defensive and less, and now of course it helps to have good tests, it helps to have a process run well, and that was part of it in Camden. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Yerkes-Dodson thing, but basically what this graph shows is that with low stress, very little pressure on people, performance tends to not be that great. A few people will do well, but performance, what's the difference? A moderate amount of stress can bring about the best performance, and then too much stress can degrade performance. So the trick with interim assessments and PLC work is how can you put just the right amount of pressure on people to perform without overdoing it, without doing what Atlanta, Georgia did with their tests a few years ago when the superintendent was holding a gun at people's head, firing principals because their test scores and people cheated, or not enough. So this is the happy medium, the Goldilocks level. So how can we build psychological safety? You know this term, Google did this big study of their most effective teams, and the single most important thing in effective teams anywhere is psychological safety. Mary Nash, a friend of mine who was the superintendent up in Maine, said, we have the power to drive people crazy. We really, we can do this wrong. So for starters, it helps to really explain the logic of this. What is the logic model? What is the logic of doing interim assessments? Why are we doing this? They're not part of teachers' evaluation. That has to absolutely be guaranteed. Paul Bemrick has always said the teachers should see the assessments in advance. So that requires a bunch of trust. That you're not going to cheat. You're not going to prep your kids for it. The teachers have to be involved. And somehow you have to establish within each teacher team meeting an ethos of data without blame. We're going to look at this without blaming. We're going to get some information from it. So that's the first one. So if you can just on your sheet, your one pager that you got from AWSA, just score yourself on that one, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like, how's the level of trust, and is that a prime area to work on, or have you already got that one figured out? We'll pause and have an all group discussion in a moment, but I want to get to one more here. So the second one is clarity on learning outcomes. Please, Miss Sweeney, may I ask where you're going with this? Asked this little boy here. And so it helps if kids know the learning outcomes. It also helps if the whole team is on board with the learning outcomes of a particular unit that they're doing. And this is a very crude graphic I put together a few years ago. So there's that one lesson that Miss Sweeney is teaching. That is part of a unit. Okay, it's a unit plan on addition and subtraction, which is part of, well, I shift here to 6th grade. It's part of a game plan here of the units, the 7 or 8 units during the year, driving toward the end of the year expectations, which is part of the school districts or the school's sort of K-12 plan to graduate well-educated, good human beings. And so things fitting together in a logical way, especially curriculum units, is really helpful. I don't know if you've seen this idea, put it together a few years ago, working with educators in New York City, of having a linear curriculum calendar. If anyone's interested, just email me and I can send you the Excel template. So this is 4 pieces of paper scotch taped together. And this was the elementary school in New York City, where they, in math, English, social studies, science, and the arts, they mapped out how long each unit was, each team. Okay. And then from that, this is a high school in Western Massachusetts, where we put up a rough copy of something like this, and different teacher teams came in and really had discussions around, well, we teach the depression in 11th grade, but you're teaching a mice and men in 10th grade. Wouldn't it be good to get those kind of at the same grade level so we can have a more coherent experience? And often teachers don't know what other teachers are teaching. So, and this is in the classroom. This is a biology classroom in the Bronx, New York City. This teacher had at the back of her room all of her units laid out. So the kids can see where they're going. Remember the kid who asked Miss Sweeney, where are we going with all this? Well, here's where we are going with this. And she has sort of key vocabulary up. The one thing this teacher did not have when I took the picture a few years ago was essential questions. So it's kind of cool to have essential questions. Here's a middle school in Long Island where the teacher laid out her units. And again, it helps if the whole teacher team is on the same schedule, teaching the same units at the same time, of course, teaching them differently. Here's a classroom that didn't have a bulletin board or anything. So the teacher put up a string. And I don't know if you can see this thing here. This is, we are here. So this is where one class was, and this is where another class was. So just, what are the units? How we got this year organized? This is a middle school in Spanish Harlem in New York City, where they put up the 6th grade, the 7th grade, and the 8th grade curriculum calendar. They put it in Excel. They went to FedEx. They got it printed in large size, and so any teacher, kid, parent, substitute teacher, superintendent can see sort of what's being taught at each grade level at what point in the year. Really helpful. And then the essential questions. And so cool for a teacher team to have thought through. This is a high school in Queens, teaching King Lear. Every classroom in this high school has got the essential questions up on the wall. So they're really getting the kids thinking at a high level about what's going on. This is in the same school. This is a high school math class, and she's got her vocabulary up there on the right. And we could pause and critique these essential questions, but we're really not talking about that today. Just the idea of getting sort of big ideas. This was actually a prison school in New Orleans that I visited, kids coming in jumpsuits with guards. And this math teacher had these amazing essential questions and curriculum up in this classroom, working at a very high level. But enough said. So how you doing on that one? Score yourself on the second one there of in terms of clarity of curriculum, because that really is the essential beginning point of a teacher team working together. They got to be teaching the same basic stuff, the same basic content and skills at about the same time, so they can then have a common assessment. And so score yourself on that one. And we will have a summative thing at the end. So then there's goals, to like a SMART goal. And a goal is a dream with a deadline, said Napoleon Hill. Kind of makes it real. So one thing we did when I was the principal in 2001 was to set a 4-year goal for 2005. So we said, okay, our first graders now are in pretty good shape. We've had teams working together. We had reading recovery. We had good curriculum stuff going on. In 4 years' time, when those kids graduate, what do we want? And we said, okay, in reading, we want them reading at level T on the Fountas-Pinnell scale. And in writing, we had devised a pretty good writing rubric, so levels 3 and 4 on that. In math, the Boston Public Schools had a pretty good math test at that point, so level 3 and 4 on that. And social competency, we were ahead of our time, did a customized report card with some of the social emotional skills. So with level 3 and 4 and that, and of course we got pushback from teachers. What, you mean 100% of the kids? And we said, no. That's 85% of the kids will be our target in 4 years' time. And we're only measuring the kids who've been at the school all 4 years. Okay, so that was a very powerful exercise. It was a highly unionized group of teachers bought into this. We had them off all over the school in 4 years' time. Oh, and by the way, then we sent teachers off in teams to set a SMART goal with an S on the end for stretch. For each grade. So in second grade, we were saying, okay, by June, we want 85% of the kids reading at level M. So that was on target. Notice in the upper levels, they're not every, they weren't at 85% yet, but the idea was each year it would get better. And long-term goals are really, really helpful to getting, where's my cursor here? Just to check in on that term, SMART goals, because I wrote not so SMART goals for years until I had a good workshop on it. Which of these is a SMART goal? Only one of them meets all those criteria: specific, measurable, attainable, results oriented, and time bound. So just read through these 4 and see which one is, send a text for which one is a genuine SMART goal. Seems to be a fair amount of agreement on this. Yeah, there we go. That's it. So it's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's results. It's all got to be about results. So the first one is an implementation issue, right? Implementing a curriculum. It's not a results, it's student results. Okay, enough said. So score yourself on that one. And we'll do one more, and then I'll unshare my screen and we'll have a general discussion about this. So the issue of getting good assessments that are aligned with your state tests, aligned with college expectations, and the same for across the team. Everyone's got to give the same assessment to have an intelligent conversation about how the kids are doing. High quality items, including writing, getting writing in there, not too long, not too short, diagnostic, reassessing previous skills. We'll talk about that in a moment. I don't know if you're working with ANET. Achievement Network is one company that's doing pretty darn good work with this. So where are your assessments coming from? Just send a text of what's the provenance of the interim assessments, benchmark, periodic, common formative assessments you're using in your district. If you joined us after the beginning, look in the chat for the code to get your cell phone texting working. Wow, so a lot of people writing their own. Rick DeFore always said home written assessments are the best, because they really have teacher ownership. They may not be the most psychometrically expert, but that's okay, he said, because it's better to have ownership and belief in the assessments, and then they can be improved over time. Some of you are using adaptive computer tests. So writing, it's an old Peanuts cartoon on writing. You have to know what you're writing about. That's it. It works at a higher level. So some people are skeptical about multiple choice questions. They say, no, you should have written things and so forth. But look at this item here. Okay, so how long is the truck? This is a 4th grade Massachusetts test item. And when we gave this, the first year we gave it, only 39 out of our 100, roughly 100 4th graders got it right. So look at the wrong answer A. Somebody want to unmute and just say, what was the misconception or the error that the 27 kids who chose that wrong answer, what did they not see?
They didn't see that they were not starting measuring at 0. They started measuring at 3 inches.
There you go. So that's a pretty important measurement skill, right? Start at the beginning of the ruler. How about wrong answer C? Anyone want to take a crack at that one? What was the misconception there?
They're looking where the tire's hitting the measurement.
There you go. The rubber meets the road. Why wouldn't it? So that's another convention that we didn't teach. And wrong answer D is actually a better wrong answer than the other two wrong answers, because they got the beginning right, but then they were looking at the rubber. So a well-framed multiple choice question can be very informative. It can actually help direct teaching and so forth. So I'm not against multiple choice questions, but they got to be well-framed. Here's a pretty darn good for like a third or fourth grader multiple choice question, right? Because the misconception is that if the denominator is large, it's going to be a larger fraction. So kind of a good question. This comes from Paul Bamrick Santoyo again. I'll show a video of him later on. This is the same curriculum standard measured at 4 levels of difficulty. So look at how different each of these questions is. So one thing that Paul says is that the standard is meaningless until you have actual assessment questions. Then you kind of know, what rigor level you're working at, what the demands on the kids will be. I mean, look, from the first to the last one, the difference in rigor, the difference in difficulty level, the difference in application and so forth. So the quality of test questions is very, very important. And again, teachers using the same one, of course. So now the thing is, in different subject areas, you have different kinds of interim assessments. So one kind is where each quarter, if we're doing quarterly assessments, each one is different. So the first quarter assesses what was taught in the first quarter, and the second assesses what was taught in the second, the third, and so forth. This can be effective for efficiency. The problem is, what if the kid gets to the fourth quarter and has completely forgotten what was learned in the earlier one? So that's a problem with that. The solution to that is maybe to have the first quarter, and then the second test incorporates items from the first quarter and the second, and the third you add on items, so you have everything that's so far, and the fourth it has the whole year. So that is one kind of assessment that works best in math usually, because math is cumulative and you've got to remember that earlier stuff. Then there's having, like, perhaps for writing, where each time you write, you're writing from scratch on a blank screen or a blank sheet of paper. So in a sense, the whole curriculum is being assessed each time. So that might work for writing. By the way, the first one might work for science and social studies, where you're doing sort of unit by unit, but you got to have a review built in. And then there's reading. See, for a kid who is reading at the third grade level to take a sixth grade test, they may know the concepts, but they can't read well enough to answer correctly. And so reading is a real issue, and computers may help us out here by being adaptive, by gearing the level like the New Zella curriculum things, so gearing it to their current level. At the same time, kids got to be able to read at the sixth grade level in sixth grade. And so should you give a sixth grade assessment to all the sixth graders? This is an ongoing issue in pedagogy. So I'm going to score yourself on that one. I'm going to unshare my screen here. And I think it's time, after we've barreled through these first 4 or 5 here, to just have a quick kind of group chat about what your reactions are so far. If you want to turn on your cameras, it'd be great to see people. And don't you raise your hand to share your experience with interim assessment so far, with the specific things we've talked about so far: building teacher trust, getting decent assessments, and so forth and so on. Who wants to start us off here? And turn cameras on. It'd be great to see people.
I can kick things off talking about starting with my school. We're an elementary school, and all of our teachers teach all the subject areas, and where we've gotten stuck is the clarifying learning outcomes, just because there's so many to tackle, and all of our homeroom teachers need to know them all. We're making some good headway in the area of math because we implemented a new curriculum, but just all things pandemic has slowed our progress a little bit. But I think that's where we'll pick things up this coming year.
Have you had teacher pushback around using the same curriculum and the same tests? Is that an issue, or is it just too much?
Yeah, so that was a side benefit, silver lining of the pandemic, because we have rather large teacher teams. We have 7 or 8 teachers at each of our 3 grade levels. But the pandemic, when we were virtual and having to reinvent the wheel, they needed to divide and conquer. And that has really gotten our teams much closer, following the same scope and sequence.
Interesting. Other comments from other schools. It'd be great to have cameras on here. I see a lot of good names here. I hope you're all tuned in and listening, but it'd be good to see your faces and hear your thoughts on this first segment.
So I'm in a 4-7 middle school, and we wanted to start a little bit smaller on the process of a PLC. So we focused in on math at the 4-5 level to start. And then, we expanded a little bit in the 6-7. We had some instructional coaches, but we were really focusing on just that process about identifying what our common formative assessments are that we created. And what I found, one piece of that got our teams to really buy in quickly is I told them not to recreate the wheel, and they have those assessments built into most curriculums. So we took those, and then we just started analyzing who was really doing the best with the assessments, and honed in on those instructional techniques. The one thing that I found actually interesting, Katie mentioned the pandemic caused everybody kind of get on that same page and go that same direction. We had that too, but I actually found that inhibited some what I feel inhibited some creativity and planning of lessons, because then we would have at those elementary grades, they would kind of like, well, I'll plan this one, you plan that one, and then they were sharing. But then it became, well, this is what I'm supposed to teach, so this is where I'm at. And then we weren't able to get over that hump yet of being able to find and really branch out and try new things. So.
Well, that is the real sort of grand bargain that I hope that America is working toward, which is the what is not negotiable. If we're teaching 5th grade math, that we're teaching this specific stuff and it will be assessed, but the how-to is where the creativity comes in. And I think that's where, like when I was teaching in the 1970s, everything was open. I mean, I could teach whatever I wanted pretty much, and there was no accountability. And I had a lot of fun teaching about the Bermuda Triangle and Angela Davis and all kinds of stuff. The Titanic, kids love the Titanic. That's fun, but it's not responsible. So I think if we can make the compromise of teaching the same what, but the how-to is where the creativity and the beauty comes in. I think that's a pretty good bargain for teachers.
One other thing that I noticed, and I don't know if anybody else has seen this, is that when I started talking with my 4th and 5th grade teams, namely about depth of knowledge and what they were assessing in the depth of knowledge, we were really assessing a lot of 1 and 2. When I started pushing them to get deeper, I got a lot of breaks, and they started to cite the forward exam, and then they started citing the heat map. And talking about how the forward exam has a lot more 1 and 2, and that's why so like we had to push the brakes in December, and about end of April, early May, we were able to circle back and get to some of those discussions of, we want to prepare these kids to have critical thinking skills for their lives, not just to do well on an exam. So that was interesting. Even the team that had made the best growth were the ones that pushed back on that a little bit. So it was just one hurdle of kind of how that standardized testing is really.
Well, it's really helpful if the state test is at a high level. That was a real breakthrough for us. The Massachusetts tests are very high level. So just by showing some items from the Massachusetts test, people said, holy cow, we're not teaching this. We got to up our game here. So is that not true in Wisconsin? Are you not having your state test not at a high level?
Well, when they get out that heat map, and anybody that's more familiar with it, please chime in, because I've only been able to dip into a little bit, but it really identifies a lot of lower level and that depth of knowledge.
Yeah, that's a problem. Well, then we got to look at college assessments at SAT and ACT and so forth. I mean, kids have got to be operating. I mean, the whole thing about Common Core was working backwards from college expectations, right? So Common Core should have. Yeah, but that's the real guts of it, is working with teachers around rigor level, quality of questions, and so forth. And I think that's why locally generated tests are better. Any other comments on this first segment?
I'm a principal of a high school, 9 through 12. We're a very small high school. By small, I mean we have about 300 students. So I would love to say that we are a PLC school. We meet in PLCs and we meet and discuss. But we have one thing that I worry about, or that I don't know how to get into the real PLCs, is we have a biology teacher. We have a chemistry and physics teacher. We have the two subjects that we teach where we have more than one teacher is civics, where we have a civics course. It's taught by two different history teachers, and Algebra 1 taught by two different teachers. So truly, if we're going to talk about and compare what we're doing in algebra, those are truly the four teachers that can have those conversations. So we've designed our PLCs toward trying to get higher level thinking, deeper depth of knowledge. What are we teaching? Then really trying to overlap where we are missing in, you talked, Kim, about what our levels are. Ours are ACT. We measure ours by ACT or pre-ACT. That's really our heat maps and what we're going to be looking at. So yeah, I would say that the levels is deep. Sometimes too deep for some of our ninth graders, but we still have places that we can go. So I love the conversation. We are going to dive in one more time this year. I think we took a step back again during the pandemic and not being able to meet, and then this past year trying to get our feet on the ground. But now I feel like we're starting to get back. Now it's a matter of getting teachers to buy in once again. What we're doing in others' classes is important. But that's my take.
Josh, your class school size is fairly typical around the United States. I mean,
you're right. You're right.
And so you have the problem, what I call the lonely singleton.
Yeah, that is the truth.
The single
trying to schedule classes and teachers is insane. That's a different story.
I know. So I feel your pain there. But the thing is that lonely, you found a way to have good PLC meetings by looking across and looking at but there is another thing, which I think may be one of the silver linings of the pandemic, which is people know how to do Zoom meetings now. Could your physics teacher go on Craigslist and find 3 or 4 other physics teachers around the state or even around the country, get your support to spend an hour each Thursday afternoon or sometime getting on a Zoom meeting and nerding out with some other physics teachers who are teaching the same content? Because everyone knows how to do Zoom now, right? So I think, I would strongly encourage that, because the pure PLC is people at the same level teaching the same stuff, right? Because then you can really have a conversation. Now you can have a conversation across levels, of course, which you're doing. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, and it's a great suggestion. Now it's trying to get a few teachers to buy into what they're doing over there, and over there has just as much to do with what we're doing as well. So yes.
Right. Well, I mean, you'd have to have common. I mean, it would take some doing, but I do know one group of physics teachers that went on Craigslist and literally found, one in upstate New York, one in Canada, one other places in the same time zone, where they really were teaching the same basic content. It would be easier at the high school, perhaps, because algebra, right? Yeah. So try to. Any other comments? This is a great discussion. And
I'll just jump in with a little bit of advice for people who are trying not to do PLC Lite. As someone who's done PLC Lite for over a decade, our district this year did contract. I'm from elementary school in Cedarburg, high performing school, and we contracted with Solution Tree to have principal coaching. And it was really powerful. We've done as a school the self-assessments that are on the PLC websites over the years, and we've used that for goal setting, which has really elevated our performance. And due to having this coaching, it also let us see how many things were in place. And we actually got PLC model school status this year. Wow. So that's opened up a lot of avenues. And today is my first retired day, but I'm going to the school board meeting to get presentation for the PLC model school. But I highly recommend using those Solution Tree resources. The principal coaching was wonderful. Solution
Tree is really one of the best places for this. So Rick DeFore did a lot of his work there. Doug Reeves works there. Matos, they really know their stuff there. So that's a great recommendation. Okay, so let's move on here, because there is more. and want to get into some of the real weeds here. So scheduling, of course, this is a fairly brief one, but just scheduling, having those assessments work around Thanksgiving and around field trips and around other things, getting those in the calendar at the beginning of the year, like that's an August kind of thing, is really, really important. And also building in the time when the assessments are going to get scored, if you're scoring them in the school, and when you're going to have the data meeting. So really getting those in the calendar is terrifically important. I worked with a school in Newark, New Jersey, different from Paul's, Bambrick's, where they really, they had it all mapped out in advance. And building in rapid turnaround also is critically important, because if you're waiting for 2 weeks for the scores to come through, that's not very helpful. So just with your cell phone, let us know what your turnaround time is from the time the kids take the tests to the time when the teachers have the data from interim assessments in their hands. How many hours or days is that? Just send a text of the letter of the amount of time here. Wow, we got some real variation here. Interesting. So 24 hours is probably electronically scored, right? In New York City for a while, we were doing scanning of these things, 40 to 24. Anything that's more than a few days is going to be somewhat stale for teachers. And so I think one of the big things is to figure out how to get this quick turnaround. I worked with a school in New Jersey that did, well, actually, I'll come to that one later. So now the issue of teachers really rolling up their sleeves and doing the analysis and so forth. So here's a horror story for you. School in the northern part of New York City, elementary school. A friend of mine was interviewing teachers for a study, and this school was doing interim assessments. And he asked this teacher, this elementary teacher, so you got this data, this is terrific, what do you do with it? And she said, we send it to the office. And he said, no, I understand, but what do you do with it? And she said, I told you, we sent it to the office. So in that school, unfortunately, it was completely compliance. There was real no use of the data. It was just, we did it, we gave the test, and we sent the results to the office. They had all the data. So how do you get the kind of ownership and understanding? And collegial scoring really helps, people doing it together or getting the results in a really digestible form. Here's my test, Mr. Sora. I left a few intentional mistakes. I wonder if you'll be able to find them. Okay. So this was an actual photo of a elementary school in Washington, D.C. years ago, where they scotch taped together 4 pieces of paper. They drew lines. Here are the kids over here. Here are the test items. Then as they scored each test item, if everyone got it, or if the kid got it right, they put a circle. If the kid got it wrong, they put the wrong answer. It was a multiple choice test. And so looking at this, they could see, okay, so this question right here, a lot of kids got it wrong. Wrong answer B was the most common wrong answer. We can look at that and so forth. And somebody said, isn't there a program called Excel? So they figured out, yes, we can save a lot of time here. And we can have something that looks like this, where again, you can identify wrong answers, you can see, but the key thing here is to have the actual test items in front of them. And this is one of the things I don't see in every PLC meeting. So you got the data, okay, you have something like this, but do you have the actual test items? So you can see why wrong answer B was throwing so many kids. And maybe it's a bad item. Maybe it's a poorly phrased item. Maybe we didn't teach it yet. Maybe we taught it wrong. But having the data and the items is a really critical part of this, which leads us to data display. So Marzano, one of the gurus of data, says that accordingly, there's a 0.70 effect size, very large effect size when you display student achievement data effectively. So what makes it effective? So I mentioned that we started doing writing interim assessments at our school in Boston years ago. And we went to a workshop with Brent Wiggins. We got all fired up about it. We gave a common writing prompt at the beginning of each 9-week segment. We scored it. And then we had somebody who knew how to do Excel, and she produced these Excel spreadsheets. So here with this class, here's the September test on the domain of mechanics and usage. Here's the September, November, March for content and organization, and for style and voice. And I defy you, I challenge you to make some sense out of these graphs, because they're terrible data displays. You really can't make any sense of them at all. Here is an elegant data display. This is, again, student writing. We've broken it down into these 7 areas: ideas, organization, voice, word choice, etc. We have red for needs work and yellow and so forth. So this is a beautiful and elegant, simple data display that can really inform teachers as they look at it. but it doesn't have to be super high tech. There's a first grade teacher in our school, Alexandra Fagan. In September, here's a writing assessment. Here's where the kids scored on their 5-level rubric. November, getting a little better. March, getting a little better. June, even better. I think she made her SMART goal for June. And so just, it doesn't have to be high tech, but you got to be able to track progress on some kind of reasonable thing. This is a principal's office, a private office in a school in Brooklyn in New York City, elementary school. These are the kids who are reading at level A, the blue Post-it notes are the kindergarten kids. And this is where they were reading on this scale of reading difficulty from in February when I took this picture. So these kids are reading at level A, these kids are reading at level B, these are kindergarten kids. The purple are the first graders and the yellow are the second graders. Now there are 3 teachers at each grade level. Their names are in the border, which is a state law. You gotta have a border, right? And so they set a target for kindergarten. We want our kids reading at level B by April. So for PLC meetings, this kind of data display is very powerful. It begs the question, look at this kindergarten kid reading at level H, in February, and look at these second graders who are way behind. What's going on with them? Just, it really spurs a discussion among these teachers. And notice all 3 teachers' data is together. So it doesn't, there's no competition. It's all just, how do we figure this out? This is the principal of that school. At that point, Kinnari Patel, teachers are constantly coming into her office, moving the kids up as they test at a higher level on one-on-one tests. Now, I'm going to come back to this graphic in a moment, but this is an error analysis where 3 teachers, Jen, Michael, and Chris, gave a test. And here's the miscue analysis, error analysis. So on question 1, all the kids, Jen's kids got it right. On question 2, 2 of them got it wrong. Question 3, 16 kids got it wrong, and so forth. So this kind of error analysis can really, again, if you have the test items in front of you, can really be helpful in having a discussion. We'll come back to that in a moment. So I hope you're just continuing to assess yourself on each one of these. So now we get to the real heart of the matter, which is the data meetings, the PLC meetings, and the actual action planning. Because without this, it's all data for data's sake. We're sent it to the office. It's no real thing. And ideally, and again, for small schools, this is going to be a little different. It may be on Zoom. Same grade, same subject is the ideal thing. A key role for an instructional coach or a facilitator, because again, Rick DeForest said the act of doing a good PLC does not naturally, he called it an unnatural act. So you need some kind of facilitation, test in hand, having the actual items, having the error analysis, which we just saw is really important. And then having a discussion about why the kids had problems with that or why they did so well at that. What were the methods that really did that? And again, keeping it low stakes. It's okay to admit errors. You have that psychological safety. And again, back to using Google Hangouts for those lonely singleton teachers. Let's really take advantage of the expertise that we've developed. However, you have issues like this. Sometimes I think the collaborative process would work better without you. You may have personality clashes. You may have to really bring people together and and emphasize that this is for the kids, and you may not be bus buddies and drinking friends and so forth, but we got to work together for the kids here. So a few years ago, Philadelphia, having spent millions of dollars on PLCs and interim assessments, did a study. And this photo was on the cover of the study. And it pointed out 2 things, the study did, 2 things that had gone horribly wrong with interim assessments in Philadelphia. And this photo illustrates one of the things that went wrong. So this is a PLC meeting. So does anyone want to unmute and just holler out what we can see from this still photo that's a warning sign about the quality of what's going on?
Nothing's in hand.
Where's the work? Where's the data? Where's the candy? I mean, it's just, and just the format here, the people aren't sitting around a table. I mean, it's kind of a horror show. By the way, the second factor in Philadelphia that this analysis said went wrong was the quality of tests. Too many low-level questions, not enough rigor, not enough writing, et cetera. So Philadelphia wasted a lot of money because they just didn't get it right. Here's a better photograph, right? People really leaning forward, looking at data. I think that's the principal on the right there. So we get some kind of real animation about curiosity. And this would be the best question to hear. Your kids did better than mine. What did you do? If you hear that question in a PLC meeting, if you're dropping in, visiting, that's a really, really good sign, because it first of all shows that psychological safety, and it shows curiosity. And it shows, they're comparing each other's results and they're actually thinking about, okay, so how can we do better as a group? What can we learn from each other? It's a wonderful question. So back to this graphic here. So these three teachers are studying together. They have time to meet. They've got the data in front of them from a common assessment that they just gave. So what are some things that they could talk about? If you're the facilitator, maybe you start with the good news. So where's the good news here? Someone want to holler out what are some things they can celebrate as a team? Kale, you unmute. It looks like you're saying something.
Sorry.
No.
I was number 4, item 4, item 8.
Yeah. No, celebrate that. Wait, and number 8 too. Wow, everyone got it right. Fantastic. It was a hard question. So now, what are some things, some other things they could talk about? Just someone holler, you or Kale or anyone else. What are some discussion points in this data?
The discrepancy on like 3, 7, and 9.
Yeah.
There's some big differences there.
Yeah, so on 3, Jen's kids had a lot of difficulty, but Michael and Chris did much better. Vice versa on question 7, kind of different on question 9. You've really zeroed in on ones where they can help each other out, right? So hopefully on item 3, Jen turns to them and says, what did you do? My kids had a lot of trouble with this, and vice versa, the shoe's on the other foot with number 7. So a chart like this, again, displaying the data by teacher is a little risky. Teachers might be a little uneasy about this, but that's a really good discussion. Anything else on this display that would be worth talking about?
They're all struggling with 13.
Yeah, so what happened there? Like, what's going on? And there's several possibilities. It could be a bad item. It could be they didn't get to that in the curriculum yet, or it could be fatigue. Maybe they're just exhausted. The kids are exhausted at this point. So, and the next 2 are not so hot either. So this, a really good data display like this with psychological safety, with good culture, can be a fantastic discussion. And let's think about all the things that have to be in place for that to happen. Obviously, they have to be teaching the same curriculum at roughly the same time. They got to have a common assessment that's a good assessment. They got to have time to score it, to do an item analysis. That's pain in the neck work, unless it's done electronically. They got to have time to meet. They got to have a good culture, and they got to have the ability to talk to each other and then follow up with the kids. So those are the steps. And I actually have a response question on that one here. So can you send a text for each of the things of those essential components that are in place in your school for your PLCs to work well? Take your time and just read these and send a text for each one that you believe is working well in your school. Just take your time, take another 30 seconds, just send a text for each ones that is, you think, operating well in your school. It may be hard to generalize, I know. So assuming that everybody's responding here, we can see very clearly what some of the issues are, especially that bottom sort of five items here, which I think are critical. A lot of unanimity around teaching the same curriculum at the same time. That's good. But the common assessments, a lot of folks are not giving common assessments unless you're just not responding to the question. That's good. There seems to be enough time to meet. That's good. But culture is not always strong. And so this to me is really, this is the heart of this afternoon's workshop. These are the ingredients that have to be in place for PLCs to go beyond Lite, to actually be, a real crucible, which they can be. Solution tree schools, congratulations to the person who just got the award on that. Schools that have got this working well, they have all these ingredients working. And I think this could really be your sort of template for thinking through. So what do we need to do to get our meetings at a higher level? Any quick discussion or comments or reactions to this? I want to unshare the screen, but if you want to just unmute and just make a comment about this, what strikes you here?
Yeah.
I hear a voice. Is someone about to say something? I think Sherry, you were about to say something.
I was just thinking that this chart would be good to give as like check-ins for PLCs too during the year, like almost quarterly or like at the end of the semester or trimester, depending what you use, and just like see where they're at and helps them as they're working towards their goals also as a team.
Yeah. And it would be an opportunity for teachers to push back, perhaps. You know, we don't have enough time to meet, or you know, we're being pulled out for these other duties, or it's so slow. Like look at item C here, prompt scoring and item analysis. You know, or it's 2 weeks before we get to meet and we've moved on in the curriculum. Right? So teachers can give feedback on, because these, I think teachers would agree, these are really important pieces to that. So this can be a checklist, and if anything's missing from it, please let me know. So let's move on to the 3 levels that student data can be used at. The first one is the teacher looking at their data alone. And teachers do need some time to sort of look it over. How did my kids do? You know, were there some items that all the kids struggled on, some writing components of it? Are there some kids who need special help? I mean, teachers need some private time, I think, to look at their data. Then there's the PLC team, the team meeting, or the remote team, looking at it again, comparing as Jen and Michael and John were, about who's better at teaching certain things, what methods are they using. And then you could bring the whole faculty together, you know, to talk about trends across grade levels. That's sort of the highest level of this. We never did this as a school, but I think some schools are doing this. So here's Paul Bramik-Santoyo. He's one of the gurus of this. And as I mentioned, I coached him 18 years ago, and he taught me a lot more than I taught him. But I want to show a quick video of him working with an individual teacher. And by the way, this is a Lonely Singleton. The teacher that we're going to see is the only algebra teacher in the school. And we're going to see just a brief video of Paul working with his teacher, and the teacher sort of opening up and sharing with him. And just I'd like to get some quick comments about this afterward. So let's show this quick video here.
So, where do you want to dig in? There's just so much. You want to just roll?
Yep. Things that I've noticed that there's progress in comparison to last year, and I think that's where I always start. And I noticed that even in their multi-step word problems, what I noticed last year is that they would only do 1 step and stop there, whereas my students this year are doing about 2, and then they stop there.
Right, they're not getting a third, but they're...
Exactly, so I think that's progress, and I looked even to see what they solved and what they didn't, and it was that they left off the very tail end.
It was fascinating because you look at every 2 sets of your open-endeds, and out of every set there was 1 of them in which they were getting close to perfection.
Right.
You know? And so it might be that's the best place to start. I just wanted to figure out what you think were the differences between the 3 in which they did significantly better than they've ever done on a first assessment, and the 3 that were more typical to their first open-endeds. What were the different? Is it just the content, or was it the rigor? What do you think were?
Sure. Let me take a look at them really quickly. So I think that their understanding of percents, they have a really strong baseline. And so any question that falls within the basic medium, they nail. They've mastered it. And so number 12 is a really good example of a medium percent problem, in my opinion. So they nailed it. And then if you look at...
They seem to do, generally looked across, they were able to find parts of wholes very well in the whole test.
Exactly. But when they were given part to parts, especially on the multiple choice, you'll see that they fell apart. But staying on the open-ended, if you take a look at...
So like number 11, which isn't percents.
Oh, right. Number sense in general, they need more work. And you'll see, I mean, I can even point out questions, where number sense questions is where they still need a lot of work.
Right.
But staying on the percent number 12 and number 25, you see that that one asks about growth and percent greater than 100. So that extends their thinking.
Okay, so you kind of get the idea here. So what strikes you in that? Just people unmute and just holler out what struck you, either positive or negative, about that interaction between a principal and a teacher, a lonely singleton algebra teacher. That's sort of a mini PLC going on there.
There's a lot of trust and ability to communicate on things that may or may not have been positive.
Yeah, definitely. That teacher felt safe in admitting stuff.
It seemed like it was led by the teacher, and that like the majority of the work moving forward is with the teacher, so that the principal can be in that true like instructional cultural.
Yeah. Anything else? So I love the way that he has his desk pushed against the wall. So he's not behind the desk, but they're sitting side by side on one side of the desk. And the way they kept coming back to the actual test questions, and they're high quality test questions too, but they're always talking about very specific stuff. Now, I got to confess, I was a principal for 15 years. I never had a conversation like that with a teacher. And this really, I wish I'd seen this years ago, because it really sort of sets for me a very high standard of how the kind of conversations that teachers should be having with each other and administrators as well. So Paul's amazing. By the way, this is his book. I don't know if you've seen, this is the second edition of Driven by Data, which is really sort of one of the Bibles of this kind of work, really a phenomenal book. And this, I took these pictures in a team meeting at Paul's school, just kind of looking over these teams. There were two teachers in this team, and Paul was sitting in. And again, they were looking at spreadsheets where they could really look item by item, what were the wrong answers, and then look at the actual test items. And that's that. Now we're really rolling up our sleeves. And I have a recording of this that we don't have time to play, but I heard at one point, one of them said, "That's the best wrong answer." Now that's the kind of really interesting comment you want to hear, and in this kind of analysis, what's going on here? What were the kids thinking here? Why was this confusing them? How can we teach it better next time? How did you teach it better? So, just sort of score yourself on that one. How's that going in your school? And then let's look at the issue of involving the kids, especially at the high school level and middle school level, but even at the elementary level, having the kids set a goal. Like, would they want to set a Spinell or a DRA level that they want to read at? Like where I am now, where I want to be, developing a strategy. The more kids are metacognitively involved and so forth, the more motivated they tend to be. I feel like you're limiting me to correct answers, says this kid. Now, this is from the high school in Queens that I showed the essential questions earlier. What they do when they give the test back is they circle the right answer, and then they ask the kids to write, why was each of the wrong answers wrong? And again, this math is beyond me. I've lost this. I knew this at one point, but I've lost it. But each of these, this is an actual student paper. They're writing out what was wrong, what was the misconception or the error in each of the wrong answers. Now, this school, inner city, New York City school, is doing phenomenally well because of this kind of stuff. Their PLCs are getting kids to really think through, to think like a test maker, and to think through, what's these finer points. And I'll send you these slides so those of you who know the math can get more out of this. So basically, you want teachers to see learning through the eyes of the student, the empathy piece, and then you want students to see themselves as their own teachers. And the more a PLC can get students thinking this way, the better. And then there's the whole issue of following up afterward. An author who has a book on Amazon can look every day at the Amazon rating. And you know that Amazon actually ranks books every day. Like out of 4 million books, you can see where your book is scoring out of 4 million books. Like it's 285,000th today. So some authors look at their books on Amazon. That doesn't change anything. Okay, that's just data. So what do you actually do with it? How can you get your book to sell more copies? And reteaching louder and slower is not going to do it. Okay. So the response to the data has got to be, with the kids, rapid, attuned to the results, and non-negotiable. Here's an old Snoopy cartoon about this. You have to move your feet too. This is in our household, this is an ongoing joke here. It's not enough to want to do something and to think about it. You actually have to do it. And so how do we follow up after looking at interim assessments in a PLC meeting? What happens next? So perhaps a 2 to 3 day reteaching blitz where we regroup the kids, differentiating perhaps having the teacher who is strongest at that particular thing teach the kids who had the most problems with it. And then teachers sitting together and having a quarterly scholarship meeting where we actually look at the names of the kids, which are the kids who need help, what name and need. That's the mantra there. So I happen to work with a principal named Pete Ternamian in a charter school in Newark. It was down the street from Paul Bambrick Santoya's school. And this school decided, okay, we're going to do interim assessments. We're going to do PLC work. So every 9 weeks, they had common assessments. This is a middle school, actually grade 5, 6, 7, and 8. And so every 9 weeks, they scheduled in Wednesday and Thursday were the interim assessments. So they gave testing conditions, very serious. The kids took these tests. Then on Friday, right after that, the parents knew in advance it was an early dismissal day. So the kids got out at about 11:30. The teachers then had 4 hours immediately after the assessments to sit down and score and analyze and plan. And then the following Monday and Tuesday, every 9 week cycle, there would be regrouping and reteaching. So a fairly simple process. And this school, I got to say, this school was an ordinary school. There were no sort of rock star people there. There were just a lot of people doing hard work. And once they set up this system, I want to show you a graph of what happened. So look at 2004. Their achievement in math and literacy was well below the rest of the state and the city, not doing too well at all, struggling, especially, my goodness, in math here. And then over a 3-year period, look at what happened. So simply, and this was the only real variable in this school, the teachers were pretty much the same, the principal was pretty much the same. And just by doggedly doing this over a period of 3 years, they were really among one of the highest scoring schools in the entire state of New Jersey. So I think this is one of the most dramatic graphs. This is in Paul's book, Paul Bambrick's book, Driven by Data. This is an incredible case study where they just did it right. And they really worked at it over a period of years and they got the system to work. So what does a principal ask a PLC to send after a meeting? The principal can't watch every meeting. Okay, so what should the group send in afterward? And I think these are the key things. What was the objective or the goal we addressed? Okay, so we were looking at the Pythagorean theorem in the 7th grade class. Okay, so that was the issue. What was the assessment we gave them for the work they were asked to do or the project? Who were the students who needed help by name and need? Who were the students who needed enrichment? And what did we learn from talking about this assessment and this part of the curriculum that can make us teach more effectively? To me, that would be just a 1-page report, just a very short report from every PLC meeting. I think that's anything missing there. I mean, I just did a slide fairly recently. What would anyone want to holler out something that you as a principal or a teacher would want to be in a report, a brief report after a PLC meeting? Maybe that pretty much nails it. So then just, keeping the focus on results, shifting the conversation, always having the principals conversations, the team conversations being about is this working? Are the kids learning what we're teaching them? And if not, what's going on? What are some best practices here? Figuring out how to fix them, following up, and just never giving up. That's a Rick DeFore phrase, just never giving up. And so there are ways of having a PLC team actually report on their progress at the end of the year. So you may recall that during the Obama administration, there was this whole thing of using test scores to evaluate teachers. And it didn't work out too well. There have been 15 or more lawsuits. Teachers have figured out that these value add scores are unfair. And I checked in at the beginning with Jim, and good news is Wisconsin has moved away from this. Massachusetts has too, but some states haven't. But I do think that Obama and Arne Duncan did have a good idea in one sense, which was, okay, you taught it, but did they learn it? So using state test scores doesn't work, but actually there are low stakes things that we can do within a school where a teacher team could actually report on their value add during the year. And we have like reading level scores like Fountas and Penel or DRI. We have writing rubrics. We have good writing rubrics now. And we have good diagnostic math assessments. We have portfolios for art and music, performance tasks in phys ed. So pretty much any teacher can actually have data about their kids' progress in the course of a year. So what I advocate, and see what you think of this, we'll unshare on my screen and we can talk about this in a moment, is the idea of having a teacher team or even an individual teacher do a baseline assessment at the beginning of the year using a reputable measure of some kind of whatever they're teaching, and then tracking their progress during the year, doing an assessment at the end of the year and reporting to the principal at the end of the year the progress their kids made. Not a big deal, not for high stakes, not for teacher salary or pay or anything. And so here's a simulation of that. So let's say there's a PLC team. Let's say it's a 5th grade team. Okay, so they're going to track their math assessment. So at the beginning of the year, they decide how they're going to measure it. Well, there's this math test, this summative math test we're going to use. Okay, so we check in with the principal. We make sure the principal agrees this is okay. This is a good test to use for measuring math progress. So they do a baseline assessment at the beginning of the year. They gave all the kids the test. So now we know what the baseline is. So now we set a SMART goal. Okay, so maybe we say we want 85% of the kids to score at a particular level or make a certain amount of growth. Okay, so now we work our butts off all year. And all year long, we're after the principal to give us better materials, to give us tutors, to help us out, to schedule things, field trips and so forth that are going to help. And the principal's dropping in and kind of watching the progress. We give interim assessments, we have PLC meetings. And then at the end of the year, we do the end of the year assessment and we actually present our value add, where the kids were at the beginning of the year, where they were at the end of the year. We present them as a team to the principal and the principal actually gives the team a score. Okay, and it's medium stakes, not a big deal, but I just, we commend, and then each teacher's individual evaluation, and we make note of that. Your 5th grade team made really good progress from your beginning and end of the year, so congratulations to you as a member of that team. So notice what's going on here. We're using an assessment the teachers trust, which is really, really important. It's for medium stakes. Campbell's law says that if you crank up the pressure too much, things go sour. So it's not for a big deal. It's not for pay or anything. It's just something we care about. Okay, so then it encourages teacher teamwork. It encourages the sharing. It certainly puts the focus on learning. It's something any teacher can use, a kindergarten teacher, a music teacher, an art teacher, a math teacher, a physics teacher. It involves meaningful goal setting. We set a goal as a team. We measure learning during the year, and we're always looking at data during the year, back to the PLC process. That's what's really driving this, is we're looking maybe 4 times a year at interim assessments, and we're discussing what's working, what isn't working. Now, if there is a weak member of the team, so Charlie is a year away from retirement, and he's sort of phoning it in. Well, we really get on Charlie. Come on, finishing kick here. We want to give you a good retirement party. Let's step up here. Let's help each other out here. The principal's dropping in all the time, helping out, providing resources and support and so forth, and maybe a little butt kicking. And at the end of the year, one advantage is the principal just has a manageable number of reporting coming in. We have only 5 teams in the school, so we sit down and we have these conversations. So I think this is a way of making student learning and the PLC process culminate at the end of the year in a really meaningful thing. So if we go back to the moment of truth, remember the teacher who taught well for 6 or so weeks and did an assessment, and the results weren't too thrilling. So really working backwards from that, how can we get things working better? And it's all about agile teaching, responsive to student learning. Like, are they learning or aren't they? Minute by minute, that's in the classroom assessments, day by day, month by month. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of the big things during the New Deal was bold, persistent experimentation. And teaching is so darn complicated. Many of you have had the experience of teaching the same lesson first period and went well, and then the same lesson second period and it didn't go well. There's so many variables. It's the kids, the mood of the kids, the experiences they're having, their prior knowledge, what's going on, and the barometric pressure, whatever the heck is going on there. And so teachers have to just keep experimenting and keep trying things. There's no one right way to do. So I just pulled this out of my file here. I haven't looked at this in years. So just to walk you through this. So this basically shows the flow of teaching. So we plan the unit or the lesson, then we teach. That's the real work. Then we might give just dipstick or formative, just check in for understanding assessments as we teach. And then there's the interim benchmark assessments and the PLC work by the team. Then we're looking at the data, then we follow up, and then we have the end of the year assessments. So my contention, and I did this years ago, but it really pertains here. I think the principal or the assistant principal or the leader of the school, the most strategic intervention is with the interim assessment PLC process. Because if you can get that working well, look at the ripple effect. Okay, first of all, it makes for better checks for understanding because people know what's coming here. It makes for better teaching. It makes for better planning. It also makes for better data analysis if that's working well, better follow-up with the kids, and better results on the formative. So this is just a sort of a one-page graphic showing where I think the critical importance of the PLC process there. So just pulling this together here, if you can, here are the 11 things we just rolled through. If you can pick the 3 where your school is strongest. So which of the 3 things that we just rolled through fairly quickly, just send a text of the 3 that you're strongest in. And then in a moment, we'll have the opposite of this, where the areas where you want to do the most work. So take your time, just to prioritize. This is anonymous, of course, and I hope you've kept score on your own individual sort of sheet.
Kim, just so you know, I was only able to reply to one of those, so I wasn't able to put in the 3. So that might be why you're seeing lower numbers.
Hey, oh my goodness, well, my bad. Gosh, I got to, okay, so this is the 3 strongest. I need to go into my program. It's too late for today, but thank you so much for telling me, Andrea. Okay, so people only have one pick here. Sorry about that. So let's see if it works any better with this, with the 3 greatest areas of need. See if you can put in 3 here. So what do you think, Andrea? Do you think it works with this one?
I didn't get the text back yet, and I did too, so I think you're good.
Okay, so this one is working. I'll fix the first one. Sorry about that. This is
No, you're
actually
good.
this is the more important one here, which is what are the areas you mostly want to work on in your school. Now we're just getting the aggregate here, which is interesting, but what really counts is your own score sheet there, which areas are the highest priority for next year to get the PLC process really working well. Wow, it's interesting. The biggest vote getter here is the quality of the interim assessments. We've also got relentlessly following up with students. Now we have a real mixture. All 11 have votes here. Take another 10 seconds to get your responses in on this one. Okay, well, I'm saving all of these for your information. So I want to just before I unshare here, I want to draw your attention, if you haven't already seen it, to the Best of Marshall Memo website. So this website, actually, let me actually just go to the actual website here, which is here. Let's just get Best of Memo website. Okay, so this is the actual website. Now, so there are 22 areas. This is pulling together the best articles from 18 years of the Marshall Memo. And right here is the area we've just been talking about, results-focused teams. So if you go to the website, it's bestofmarshallmemo.org, and click on this one right here, it brings up the table of contents for the articles that Jen, David, Lang, and I chose for this one here. So these are the 15 articles, the best articles that we could find in the archive of thousands of articles on this. And if you click over here, you have all the articles right at your fingertips. Okay, so one after the other, they can be read, each one in under 5 minutes. And then if you click on the next one, you can actually download the PDF and you own it. Okay, and if you click here, you can listen to a recording of it. It takes about an hour long. So this is the very best thinking that we've seen from all the years of the Marshall Memo, and I've been watching very carefully for this issue, is on results-focused teacher teams, alias, AKA PLC. So I urge you to check those out. It does a much better job than I could do in just 90 minutes here. So let's just, we got 5 more minutes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's working in your schools, any questions you have for me. I'm happy to respond to any, bless you, to any questions or thoughts or suggestions.
This is Joy Redmond, and I apologize for not being able to use video, but we are a small school and we're trying to create a schedule that will allow, we have some singletons and some 2-track, but we noticed that some of the pieces that we're missing are our specialists, our SPED teachers and our specialists. How do you create a schedule that would allow them to be an important part of our PLC? We're really in the beginning stages of it, but so we've got the teachers the time together, the core teachers, but not the special ed and the specialists. So do you have suggestions for that?
Wow, that is close to my heart. I scheduled our school for for 15 years, and that's one of the big questions is how do you get, because you really got to have the special ed teachers there and the Title I teachers there to talk to the grade level teams, but sometimes they're doing other things. So you get the Marshall Memo. In this week's Marshall Memo, there's an article about scheduling. And I'm actually having a webinar tomorrow with the guys who wrote that article. One of them is Craig Gibbons. I'm blanking on the other guy's name. So look in this week's Marshall Memo. They work at a group called District Management Council. And one of their big specialties is scheduling. So if you go to their website, District Management Council, or just email one of these guys, because their emails are at the end of that article, they have a lot of thinking about this very subject. And I summarized very quickly in the article some of the things. They have some software too. I didn't plug their software because I don't do that in the Marshall Memo. But if you email them, Joy, I think you'll be able to get some insights about this. I can't do it justice now. Specials, because the problem with specialists, the art, computer, music, library, and phys ed, they're always teaching while the PLCs are meeting, right? That's how the PLCs can meet, the kids are off in phys ed or somewhere else. So those people can only really meet productively with other teachers on early dismissal days or on all day professional days. And so that's the beauty of those. And I don't know if your district has that. Do you have times when all the teachers are free at the same time?
Probably twice a year, which unfortunately is currently scheduled with 100 other things, but we're working at it. We don't have really dismissal, but I will look into the Marshall Memo, see if we can come up with some ideas.
I know that District Management Council, the group they work for, has been working on this for years. And it's one of their passions is how do you get the schedule so the right teachers can meet at the right time. So I hope they can be helpful. And just when you email them, just said that I suggested you email. So I hope they're helpful. Other kinds. So
thank you.
Somebody had their hand up. Was it Brian?
Brian had his hand up.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just I was reflecting. I've been in the same school of about 1,500 students, a little over 100 teaching staff, and I've been in the same school since '99. So I had a chance to see the evolution of PLCs, and we've gone from, really emphasizing those interim assessments to kind of moving away and thinking about like the more actionable, like formative assessments. Here's how students are doing this week. Here's our next step for learning. And as a result, we kind of moved away even from the formal processes of like having data in hand, the spreadsheets with an item analysis. And we used to do all that and even had a data wall. And I think with our leadership team now, we're kind of wondering how we can get back to some of those more formal pieces without, sacrificing the in-time discussions on like how students are performing today. I really like those two ends of the spectrum, like how can we challenge students with enrichment and how can we make sure all learners are keeping pace, and those two pieces I think allow us to be real actionable from week to week, but we sort of lost the formality of having data in hand as a feature of PLCs, which we know is really important.
So why did the school move away from it? I'm curious.
Yeah, I just think it was different expectations from different leaders, like that piece around, we have these semester exams and that's our interim exam, and we're putting a lot of emphasis on an exam when students, it's you know, they're going to leave or possibly move to another class, and we're not going to be able to act on that. We'll be able to act on it generally with like groups of students, but not individual ones.
Right. So doing assessments on a weekly basis is interesting, but then you don't have an extended time period where you can really put together and maybe get to higher level stuff. So one of the things that struck me the most in the Marshall Memo over the years has been the research on the spot in the classroom assessments. And some people use, the British call that formative, but I would use dipstick. I mean, what the teacher does actually as they teach, like polling kids or exit tickets would be at the end of the lesson, but ways of checking for understanding in real time. And the worst check for understanding, of course, is any questions? That's a horrible check for understanding. So really polling kids, like using clickers or using polling or some way of seeing in real time and fixing the problem right then. So that's the gold standard research in education. So you were talking about two polls, you know, this sort of less frequent and more, the most effective of all is in the classroom. And there's a lot of, actually on the Marshall Memo website, there's a whole area there, the one I just showed you, on like checking for understanding. I forget what it's called. I'm sure you'll find it. But I think if you can get teachers, and some of your teachers I'm sure are doing it right now, some teachers, especially math and teachers, they do that a lot. But there isn't enough checking in real time. And then perhaps exploring like every 6 weeks or so, getting back to the kind of thing that I've been talking about, you know, for the last hour or so of really high quality interim assessments. I think those are the two ends to work on. And both of them complement each other. You know, they really work together. So Brian, good luck with that. That's it sounds like you're tweaking, and you've got a big school, so you have enough people at each grade level to have a real discussion.
Right. No, I appreciate the feedback. We really have wanted to emphasize more like identifying, you know, learning targets and purpose. And I think we've made some really good work there. And now our next step maybe is to having those 6 to 9 week pieces that we can look at to sort of see how we're doing as a whole.
Yeah. Well, AWSA is going to send you the slides, so you'll have all the details. But I mean, the devil's in the details with PLCs. And unfortunately, it's been royally screwed up around the country. It's really sad that a good idea has been implemented so poorly in so many places with good intentions. And I hope this afternoon will sort of guide you to get it right, as some of you already are. But just it's all about the specific details of it, those 11 things, getting those right. And then I think you can really take off. I mean, think of that school in Newark, New Jersey, tough school, just absolutely soared once they got this thing working correctly.
So overcoming that negativity in some places is a monumental task, because they've been, some people had good intentions and had good trainings and had some good things. They went by the wayside, and then things went to a negative. And I'm in that position where I had to come in and try to, people were not wanting to use the term PLC. And I said, yes, we need to use the term PLC, and let's define what it really should be.
Yeah, there you go.
Avoiding it. So it's been a lot of work.
Yeah, it is so sad to me that, again, I first saw this in Paul's school 18 years ago, this school just really doing great stuff, and it looked easy, but it's not easy. You know, a talented person like Paul makes it look easy, but I hope what I've done is to deconstruct the process that he used so that a person in your position, Chris, or the rest of you, you know, can actually sort of go back to basics and get teachers' trust and get it working well. One of the things I sent, and I think you're getting all these handouts, is the longer version of that Georgia story that I told you from Camden County, Georgia, which it's a wonderful story, and maybe having teachers read that and just see these are natural reactions. Teachers are not being, you know, mean-spirited to be worried about PLCs. They have good reason to be worried. You know, it can be done badly, but if it's done well, it really, I mean, I think it's good for morale. It's good for teachers' feelings about their work, and teachers are so tired at this point. Both of my children are teachers, and my God, they're tired. This has been a really tough year, but maybe this can be one of the ways of getting that spirit back. So they're getting out the hook for me here, right? We're out of time, right? We're for overtime, but I appreciate all of you joining us this afternoon. I hope this has been helpful. You'll get the slides, and feel free to email me. You have my email with every week's Marshall Memo. Feel free to email me with any ideas or inspirations or just any questions.
Thank you, Kim. And thank you, everybody. You know, that fatigue is real. And we so appreciate you joining us today to support the folks who are feeling that fatigue as they work to close up this year and focused on next year. And we did keep track of those who kept their cameras on. And we have a lucky door prize winner. The AWSA Padfolio will send to Kale. So anyway, but everybody deserves 40 of those bad boys. So thank you so much, everybody. Kim, thanks for being with us, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And have a good summer. Good grief.
Absolutely.
Really